to have as much time for our speakers as possible. Welcome everyone. I'm Audrey Perry Martin. I'm the moderator today. I'm on the board of the Women in Law Committee, and I get the honor of introducing our speakers and talking a little bit about this event. But first, I wanted to start with an opening prayer, and I will give that. Our dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful for the many blessings which we all have in our lives. Father, we are grateful that we are able to gather virtually today to talk about balancing work and life and all the other many demands on our time, and still making room to put thee first and to make sure that our priorities are in line and that we are doing as thou would have us do. And Father, please help us as we listen to these speakers, that we will be inspired to know how to better balance our own lives and how to keep our priorities in order and to listen to thee and have space, plenty of space in our lives to follow the promptings of the Holy Spirit and do as thou would have us do in helping and caring for others. And we say these things humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Okay, so I wanted to give a little brief introduction to really excited about this event for some time. Angel Zimmerman, who many of you know and who helped plan this event with Carly Madsen, she came up with the title Work-Life Chaos for this event. And I as soon as I heard it, I thought that was beyond a perfect title, because that's really what it is. You know, maybe there are a few people out there who find the perfect balance, but I think for most of it, it's a little chaotic trying to figure out how to balance work and life and all the other things that commitments that we have going. So I am really excited to hear what our speakers have, and I love the format of today's event. We have 3 couples speaking to us today, and you know, how better to get the real story than have three couples, both the husband and wife, talking about, you know, how their work-life chaos really is. So I'm going to give a quick introduction of the speakers, then we'll have around 15 minutes for each of them to speak and hopefully have some Q&A time at the end. So our first speakers are Angel Zimmerman and Larry Zimmerman. Angel is the past international chair of J. Reuben Clark Law Society, past president of the National Conference of the Women Bar Association, which is a sister organization to the ABA. Both Larry and Angel serve on many communities. They are very involved in the community in Kansas they live in. They have 4 adult children and their own law firm. Anna Mae Walker Arner and Alex Arner are our next speakers. Anna Mae Walker is a 3L and Alex Arner is a 2L at BYU Law School. They have a 1-year-old daughter named Ivy Mae, who's currently obsessed with dogs and grapes. After law school, Alex will be practicing corporate law and Anna Mae will be clerking, and Ivy will be going to preschool. Dennis Beatty and Troy Beatty. Troy is our final speaker. So Troy serves as a general counsel at White Oak Global Advisors, which is a San Francisco-based private equity, private debt, SEC registered investment advisor. And then Denise Betty is on the director of student life, is the director of student life at BYU Law. She's responsible for ensuring that programs and services are added to the success of students inside and outside of the classroom. They're the parents of 6 children and they reside in Utah. So next I will turn the time over to Angel and Larry.
Sure. Thank you. We are really pleased to get to talk to you about this topic. And in my work with the National Conference of Women Bar Associations, it got to a point where women attorneys were talking and actually kind of being fairly discouraging of women going to law school. And so a group of women got together and said, hey, we want to share that law school is a very positive experience. And so they came up with this title that we would tell her story. And in our law firm, I tend to do more of the speaking community work, and Larry does a lot more of the writing and the journals. And so I got asked to write a chapter and I'm like, this is not what I do. But after pondering and praying about that for a little bit, I did decide to submit a chapter called on time management to this book called Her Story. And that's really when I came up with this concept more of the work-life chaos. And in it, I shared a little bit that it says, I contend that I often am at peace and maybe not balanced. I like the process of finding balance from chaos, not necessarily the end product. I think some of us are the same because we are lawyers, and finding balance, not necessarily being in balance, is fundamental to who we are as professionals and people. And for Larry and I, that's definitely been something as we've raised our 4 kids in a law firm that we practice together at. The tip that I really wanted to share with you guys first is something that I got from a Court of Appeals judge here in Kansas. She was a single mom raising 4 kids back probably about 40 some years ago when she was going to law school. Oh, probably 50 years going to law school. She shared this, she said lawyers like to win. And so she always told herself, I need to win. And as she was going to law school, she says, what's important now is WIN. Sometimes she needed to stay and study. And other times she said, I needed to be in the bleachers watching my sons play. And lastly, sometimes I needed to be in the bleachers studying and watching my kids play. And that's something that really helped carry me through law school as we were going. You guys get to hear from me a lot. So this is really the opportunity to get to hear from Larry, how we kind of jointly balanced and worked through our chaos events of going to law school at separate times, and then also raising kids and coming to buy out a firm and work together.
I'm a native of Topeka, Kansas, and in Topeka we have an Air Force base. It's not active now, but growing up it was very active, Forbes Field. And when I was a brand new attorney, Angels, through the Bar Association, scored me a ride on one of the KC-135 fuel tankers. These are the big planes that have the fuel boom out the back, and when the B-2 bombers or various F-16s and all are refueling, the boom steers out, fuels the plane. So I love airplanes, so I was excited to go on that. There were like 12 or 15 of us, and we had free reign of the plane. We got to there were no seats in it. It's just an open belly plane. We got to run all over the place, got to drive the fuel boom. And in the back where the fuel boom is, it's a glass floor that looks down. And it was supposed to be a 15-20 minute flight, turned into 2.5 hours because they couldn't find another unit exercising to refuel. So they kept flying us all around, waiting to get another vehicle, plane to refuel. And we ended up flying over the Dakotas, and at 40,000 feet, somewhere around there, and it was just gorgeous. I mean, it's this very uniformly beautiful mountains and plains areas, and there are trees, and you can see tiny little hints of civilization, but it just looked wonderfully cohesive and naturally organized. And what I realized is if you want to avoid chaos, you just pull back to a higher altitude. If the chaos of daily life is overwhelming, and we feel that we've missed something or not lived up to our responsibilities as parents or as spouses or as to the church or to the career, you just kind of pull back up to a higher altitude and get a bigger picture. And where I think that means for us is one of the high altitude decisions that we have tried to live by is that we want to be a cohesive team. We come from Kansas. There are lots of family farms. I don't know how many of you come from a farming background, but there's the division of labor as far as a husband that goes into the office and a wife who stays home with kids doesn't really describe what a farm life looks like. It certainly didn't for my family, and even after my family moved off the farm, making money and surviving as a couple for my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents was a collaborative effort. And so we very much decided that's something we wanted. We wanted not a family farm, Neither of us are gifted in that area, but we could have a family firm, something that Angel and I would do together, and something that would incorporate our kids, something that they got to be a part of. It started very young. Our youngest, I have a picture of her. I didn't bring it, unfortunately, but she's about 4 or 5 years old, and she is in the office, and she is picking up paper clips and staples and all that stuff, the bits of paper that gather around your copy machine. She's hard at work in the firm picking up all that stuff. They have come on as payroll when they were young, building their 401k, earning their own money, and supporting us, not just in kind of running the firm, but being publicly involved as well. Angel has served on speaking panels with several of our daughters, and we have done conferences together. But the chaos of managing a family and managing a marriage and was really simplified for us by moving back up to that high elevation, 30, 40,000 feet, and realizing what we're trying to do is to create a family unit means of progressing together temporally as well as spiritually. And I think the moment I felt happiest that we had somehow accomplished that was several years back when Angel was being sworn in as president of the National Conference of Women Bar Associations in Chicago. It worked out that we were all able to join her and be present at that. And we got there a little bit early, and they were starting to try to set up the conference registration and handing out the packets, but things were a little discombobulated. There were people coming from different places in the country, and it wasn't fully organized and wasn't meeting my kids' standard for how a conference should be run, having gone to conferences all their life. So all 4 of the kids stepped in, organized the bags, filling all the swag stuff and all the materials. They started handing out name tags. They just took control of the conference. And it's like, that's something, that ability to hop in and be able to help at something meaningful that allowed the women participating to participate directly in the conference, not the basic management of it, was very impressive. And then as we sat down and things started, people started milling in to begin the conference, one by one, each of my children got a call or a text from their employment, needing their comment on something, or needing to know where something was put, or needing to know where an email should go. And so it just felt to me it was a proud papa moment to see this thing that we tried to build together, this family firm, for all the problems and chaos it did introduce. It also left our kids with a set of skills that are useful to them in a very real way, and allow them to go out into the world, contributing not only to organizations they belong to, but to their employers in ways that I don't think they would have had if they had maybe a more traditional upbringing. So,
yeah, just the last. So how we decided to do it, we put Larry through law school, and I was working for a law firm, and so we had 2 kids, and then we had 2 more while he was going to law school. He was out for 3 years, and then we got the opportunity from my boss for me to get to go to law school. So we sent, the kids were now 3, 5, 7, and 9, and we went back into that environment. So of 9 years, 6 of those were of our kids growing up. Our kids are watching us to go to law school, which I think was a good thing. They watched mom and dad study and study hard. The other thing is that we decided not to do daycare. That's one of the things that I went to my employer. So Larry and I switched both while he was going to law school and when I was going to law school, we were literally in class 2 hours, at the office 2 hours, in class 2 hours, at the office for 2 hours. And we switched and we did that all day long. We added seminary, we added elders quorum to that. So it definitely, those felt like some pretty chaotic years, but really paid off. And our kids enjoyed traveling, enjoyed being their own little unit. They always were this little foursome. And I think one of the pivotal moments is last year, my 4 adult kids decided that they could readjust their schedules to all 4 of them go to Portugal together. That's not a parent paid kind of thing, and none of their trips were parent paid, but they always found time to travel and earn money and then travel together. So that was a pretty cool pinnacle moment that we're now getting to see some of the fruits of our labor. So pretty cool. And that's us.
Sorry, my computer froze for a second. I'm having some technical difficulties. So our next speakers are
Got a hand
Anna
waving.
Mae Walker Arner and Alex Arner. And thank you so much, Angel and Larry. That was fantastic.
Sure.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, guys. Alex and I are
Yes.
is this working? Alex and I are in different locations right now. I'm at BYU Law School right now, and Alex is working. And so because of that, we've kind of divided up our thoughts into 2 sections. And so I'll go first and then pass the baton to Alex. Like our intro said, I'm a 3L, my husband is a 2L, and we have a 1-year-old daughter who is just learning how to walk and is very exciting and very fun. As we were thinking and preparing for this, we've decided that we want to have some principle-based things, but we also want to just give an example of what we do logistically, in case that gives people ideas. I just think that when you're trying to balance multiple careers and a family, and faith and friends and all the things that come at you in work-life chaos, sometimes it's nice to see logistically how it works for someone, just so that you can try and add things into your life. I've talked to lots and lots of people to try and figure out the puzzle of what we have right now. So we decided to go to law school. I had always wanted to go to law school, and then I was convincing Alex to come to law school, but we decided to do it in not in the same year, just because I was aware of how intense your first year of law school was. And so it was really valuable for us to be on alternate years. So I went first. I was pregnant during my first year, had a baby during my first summer, right before my husband started school. And then at that point, Alex had been really supporting me through the first year of law school, doing all the meal planning, all the food, all that stuff. And then it switched a little bit while he was a first year. And during that time, I took less credits the first semester, and then kind of went back to fullish time the second semester. And we had childcare. We had a nanny that came to the law school to meet us. So I was able to breastfeed during breaks in classes. And that strategy worked really well when she was little and wasn't running around and thought that the law school was still entertaining. So we did that last year. And then this next summer, how our work-life chaos happened was I was working at a big law firm. And so Alex got a online part-time job for most of the summer. And then we switched and I was home with our daughter for the second half. So basically we did halves. I worked for the first half, he did second half. And that's how it worked out that summer. And then this summer we have a nanny again, but this time she is at our house so that Ivy can go to the parks and do all the fun things and is not trapped in the boring law school. But it's definitely a puzzle to put together how it's worked out and how we've been able to balance it. It hasn't always felt like balance. But one thing that has been super important for us is that we've had to make our communication really, really formal. When we were first married, it worked for us to be able to talk about things on the fly or as they came up. But once law school started and once we added Ivy and just as more pressures came, we've had to be really, really careful about guarding our family council time. So what we do is every single Sunday we have set family council time that has set topics. And there's obviously sometimes things that come up in the middle of the week that you have to talk about in the moment, but we usually have a running list on my phone of topics that we want to talk about every Sunday. And those topics usually include, well, I guess the topics that always get talked about are we do a mini check-in on how our marriage is doing. Sometimes it's long if we've been fighting, and then sometimes it's very short, like, oh, this is a good week. Here's what we're doing for a date or something like that. Then we have a small conversation about Ivy, our daughter. And then we do also personal check-ins. How are you doing mentally? What are your pressures? And then we do our scheduling at that time. And that's where the logistics of, okay, Nanny's fallen through. How are we going to trade? What can I skip? What can you skip? How are we going to make this work? And for us, it's been really important that that conversation happens formally and also happens really regularly. Just because it is, Alex will talk about this a little bit more, but we don't feel like balance is necessarily the easiest word or the most applicable word to what our situation has been. Because it just caught, what we're doing, I think, and what a lot of us are doing calls for constant communication and constant readjustment. And then I wanted to add one last thing before I give it the baton over to Alex. And this is just our more principal thing. So that was kind of our logistics of how we're doing it and what we've chosen to do and what's worked for us. But one thing that we have applied from our faith that has been really important in our marriage and in our careers is this concept of agency. I think there's a lot of default settings. I grew up in a very traditional home, traditional, religious, and I think there's a lot of default settings for what roles each partner in a marriage should have and what your life should look like or what you should do. I don't think a lot of the default settings are not bad, and a lot of the default settings also are put in place for a reason. But for us, it's been really empowering to make sure that we are not just operating on default and that we're consciously choosing what we're doing. Because even if you are overwhelmed or have a really sucky job, it feels slightly better when you consciously chose that I want to play this role at this time in my life, or I want to be in charge of this. It helps us feel a lot more like we're building something together and less overwhelmed. It's still overwhelming, but I think our efforts to implement our agency in our own life has been probably one of the most valuable principle-based things that we've applied. So Alex, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Jenny. Great job. I don't even know if I have that much more to add. She nailed it. But I do have a few things I want to mention. So there are a couple of ideas I think have been helpful, like principles that have guided Anime as we've made decisions. And some of them from hard lessons learned, some of them just from other principles. So one of the first principles that I want to talk about is that this idea that not all time is created equal. And this is a kind of a guiding principle for Anime and I and how we make decisions. And the story of this idea came actually from a book that I was reading, and the author was talking about a conversation he had with his wife. And his wife had been competing in triathlons and Ironmans throughout the previous few years, had been doing very well and competing competitively. And she came to her husband and said, I think that this year I could win it all. Like, I think I can do it if we do this together. And, he's in the middle of work. He has his own pressures. But he made a conscious decision at that time to realize that not all time is created equal. And by that, I mean, he could tell that this was the year she could do that. Like, this was the year where the competition she could succeed, where she could achieve in that time frame. And like, she couldn't do it in 10 years. Whereas his job would probably still be there in a few years. And so like some of the practical applications of that is, for example, like not all time is created as a first-year law student. Like, your grades matter, pressure's real, and you have to perform. Similarly, as Anime wants to clerk, and that is something that really only happens in the first few years of law school. So like being aware of what is the value of the time itself. that you're sharing with each other. I think is a helpful principle for us. Another thing that we've had to figure out is to have fun in our marriage. I think it's super easy, so we were in New York City this past summer. Both of us were working, or I was taking care of the baby, and we were making lots of professional decisions. And there was a point where we literally felt like our whole relationship was professional. Like, and a relationship is a holistic thing, and we weren't having as much fun anymore. We were constantly bogged down by the decisions we were making. So Aunt May and I had to set rules with each other that we would not talk about jobs after like 6 p.m. or law school after certain times. And that's still something we have to do, because I think when your lives are integrated and you're trying to balance, it's really easy to get sucked into the constant stresses of your life. But if you want to have a holistic marriage that's bringing vitality, you need balance, and you need fun, you need professional, you need all of it. And then the one other principle that I want to talk about is that Anime and I believe in trade-offs and not balance. So one of the ideas that I've been studying this semester is that all of us kind of have 4 burners in our life, and like 4 key priorities. It's family, friends, health, and work. And the reality is that oftentimes we can't be exceptional at all 4 of them. And so I think in an ideal world, we will. I think there are times in life where we can be. But I also think that it's helpful to realize at times to really think about what our values are, and then to live according to those values and to make conscious decisions and examine whether or not our actions are aligning with the values that we think we have. So yeah, those are a few things that have helped Aunt May and I, and we're happy to chat with other people at another time.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that, and sharing how you two work it out. That it was very inspiring. So our next speakers are Denise Beatty and Troy Beatty.
All right, I'm gonna go first and then hand it over to Troy. So Troy and I spent some time talking about this topic, this idea of balance, and we sort of have divergent views on that. So I'll just share that I don't think that balance is a real thing. There is no balance per se. There's priorities. That's how I look at it. And whatever your priorities are, hopefully you're finding a way to make those important and central to what you're doing. Just a little bit of background on Troy and I. So I actually went to law school first. I was single when I moved up here to Provo to go to law school. And I met Troy in my second year of law school, and we got married between my second and third year of law school. And then he was still an undergraduate, and so he still had a lot of school ahead of him. I was pregnant with our first child when I graduated law school, and then eventually went back to work for BYU Law after graduating from BYU Law in the library, and was able to, I just have loved working in law schools, and that's been the bulk of my career. And so eventually, while I was working there, Troy started to attend law school. And while in law school, we had twins. So by the time, during Troy's second year of law school, I had the twins. And it was a little crazy. I ended up in the hospital for 6 weeks while Troy was trying to take his second year finals, which I think he'll tell you wasn't great for any of us. And so by the time Troy graduated law school, we had 3 kids. And so we moved from Provo to DC so he could take a job with Baker & McKenzie and start his career. And at that time, I took a step back from my career to be home with our kids. I actually haven't thought about this in a long time, but I was talking to somebody about this, and I realized that I had actually been pregnant 8 times in 10 years as we had our family, which is a little crazy looking back on it. It seemed perfectly normal at the time. I don't know why, but it wasn't. And so, so we ended up with lots of little kids, very young, in a very short period of time. And Troy progressed from working for private practice. He went to the government, to the Securities and Exchange Commission, so that he could see the kids on occasion, and then bounced back out to private practice after 12 years with the government, at which time I also went back to work. And so, and I went to work for George Mason Law School. And then now I'm here at BYU Law School. And we've just had some really interesting experiences during that time. When Troy was a law student, he actually did an internship in Russia, which he left for when our twins were 6 weeks old. And so I was at home with the 3 kids, 2 of them at 6 weeks old, and he left to do that internship. We also obviously when he worked in big law and did big law stuff, he was rarely home. We didn't see him very much. There were high billables. He was very busy. When he moved to the government, he was in the international division. And so it got to the point where he was traveling about 150,000 miles a year. So he was gone probably 2 weeks of every month. So there was a lot of the parenting fell to me, a lot of the home care, a lot of pretty much everything outside of Troy's work was on my shoulders. And so, so to me, that's not very balanced. And we didn't have what I would call balance, but what we did have was priorities. And so we tried to think outside of the box as one of our biggest priorities has been our marriage. And how important that is to both of us. And we didn't just want to be married and exist together. We wanted to have a marriage that thrived. And if you want to have a marriage that thrives, you have to make your marriage a priority. So we date every week. That's super important. And we rarely let that go by. One of the things that we did when he was working at Baker and McKenzie, for example, we really didn't have very much time together. And so I would drive him to work in the mornings just so that we could have some time to connect and talk and to just be together because there wasn't very much time for that. Another priority for us is our family. And so because we are so incredibly busy, both of us, and we have very demanding jobs, we set aside time every year, a lot of time actually for vacation. And so when we play hard, and our kids, vacations are really important to us. We get lots of comments from people, oh, you guys take lots of trips. Yes, we do. But we also work a lot all the rest of the time. And so our vacations are super important to us because they're the time that we get to connect with our kids. And we try to make those connections with them during the week, but they're just in small spurts of time. And that concentrated time that we got to take on vacation was really special to us and to our family. And we've made lots of really, really good memories. Our spiritual life is also very important. So we both have had taken time aside to be able to do our callings and to serve and to do those things. One of the experiences that we did when Troy left the federal government, he went back to work for a firm in New York. We lived in Virginia. And so he would go to New York Monday through Thursday, and then we'd see him on the weekends. And at the time, he was actually serving as the executive secretary to the state presidency. And we thought, oh, for sure, he's going to get released. He did not. And so he would come home on the weekends and have meetings and calling things that he had to do. And we just managed to find a way to make that work for us because our spiritual life was also really important to us and serving was important. And so I think one of the things that I would say to anybody that's trying to find balance, so to speak, is figuring out what's most important to you and then thinking of ways to make those things happen, even if they're not traditional, right? Not everything that we've been able to do is maybe normal in other people's eyes, but it worked for us and it helped us to stay connected to each other. And our family motto is short-term sacrifice brings long-term blessings. And we've always looked at every decision in that way. Is this going to require a sacrifice? Is it a sacrifice we can make? Is it worth making? And then investing in that sacrifice, knowing that it's just for a time and that when it's over, it will have been worth it. And I can definitely say every time we made a sacrifice, it was worth it. When he left for Russia, when I had the 6-week-old twins, it was hard. It was really hard to be alone with 3 small children for 6 weeks. But it was totally worth it. And it led to the next job that he got when he moved to New York to work. And we did long distance for 2 years. That was very difficult. I was teaching seminary. I was raising 6 kids by myself. And he was gone most of the time. And so, but that sacrifice really was meaningful to our family. It enabled our older children to finish high school in Virginia, which was really important to them and to us. And then it was the stepping stone to the next job we got where we were able to all finally live together again in the same place, in the same location. And it was worth it. And even coming to Utah, Troy's been really great about following my spiritual promptings, you know, one to move to California, one to move here, and all of those promptings, everything that's happened has worked together to really get us to a situation where we're in a really good spot. And now that I'm back to working full time, Troy's had to, I'm interested to hear his perspective on this because we've had to flip flop a little bit our family roles too. So Troy does most of the grocery shopping now. Troy does the bulk of the cooking now. Troy takes our daughter to doctor's appointments, which is delightful to me to have that experience after spending 20 years taking kids to the doctor. And so we've just tried to figure out what works for us and to pitch in where we can and to take over the responsibilities that make more sense for one or the other of us to have. So I'll let Troy, and I will also say, let me preface before he talks, we rarely agree on anything. I I think it's
I was
one
just
of
going to say,
the
there's a few
problems
things
of-
I'm going to need to correct, but
yes,
I'll
yes.
do that.
So anyways, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, seriously, I have been the recipient of a lot of support from Denise. Unfortunately, she was the recipient, I think, of my inability to create balance, at least initially in my career, right? With 4 kids under 5, you know, I was working 60-hour weeks. The practice of law really has changed, and I'm probably going to date myself a little bit here, but when I started practicing, you could not log online to check your email. You didn't have an iPhone or a BlackBerry, so you had to be in the office really to check your emails and to be responsive to, you know, the partners and the clients. And I think the practical reality is that attorneys that are responsive, and I see this both when I was in, you know, private practice, and now I contract for services from maybe 40 different law firms, you know, by our firm and our portfolio companies. And the firms and the attorneys that are responsive get the business. And so, you know, the issue is, how do you, you know, juggle those work demands with your other values and priorities? I think in some respects it's easier now, but it's harder too, given the technological tools that we have. We can always be connected, which is great because, for example, I work from home, right? As Denise was saying, and I just dropped our daughter off at her job, which is great. And I love that. You know, and so I think that change has been helpful, but also I heard the phrase once, you know, you're not working from home, you're living at work. And I feel that way sometimes, right? Like my boss, the CEO, he always expects me to be on, whether it's, you know, 6 in the morning or 10 at night. And I can be, right? I can come down into the office and be on. So I think it's important, and it took me a long time to figure this out, is to develop some priorities, but then also your boundaries, right? The work will always be there. And the question is, how do you manage that in a way that still gives you time to, you know, be with your family, you know, do the things you want to do. You can't work all the time. You'll get burnt out. I tell my team that all the time. We could work all the time, but we don't. And it's important that when we work hard, but when we don't, we don't. And I think, you know, I don't have great advice on that. Denise will probably tell you I didn't set very good boundaries initially, and she'd be right. I feel like I'm better at that now. Certain calls will come in, I won't pick them up if we're having dinner, for example. I do think it's helpful to develop, and I've been surprised a little bit. I've hired a lot of attorneys in my career, how few really focus on becoming more productive. And I think when you have a lot of demands, you need to get more done in less time, right? Like when I had 6 kids, worked at the law firm, when I'm, you know, competing for promotion against another attorney that doesn't have 6 kids and he or she is single, I just had to work harder and smarter. And, you know, there are a lot of tools that you can use if you don't know how to type. I think such a crucial skill. You know, we hired a guy one time, he's like finger pecking, trying to write a contract, right? Well, you know, if I need a contract drafted, I'm going to need to draft it quickly. So, you know, I guess my 3 thoughts would be, think carefully about your boundaries, stick to them. I think, you know, you can be successful and maintain strong boundaries. Try to develop productivity secrets. I have all sorts of, I get like 500 emails a day from our portfolio companies, from my boss, from, you know, and so just managing your inbox, managing the influx of communication, management skills, like any sort of productivity skills you can learn so that you can work harder and smarter is going to benefit you in your career. And like Denise says, you know, does success require sacrifice? I think depends on how you define success, right? And there's priorities. You only have so much time. And so you have to allocate that to the things that matter to you. And I feel like I'm getting better at it as I get older. I'm not perfect. And Denise will certainly confirm that fact. But I'm confident that all of us can find, more semblance of balance in our lives.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Troy and Denise, and to all of our other speakers. So we do have a little bit of time for questions. If you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, or we could type them in the chat. Either one works.
So I think from all three stories, I really appreciate that there's no one way of doing it. And I think that's one of the things as I was growing up, that there was kind of one path, and, and there isn't one path. And I am so grateful for three very, very different stories. And I hope that's what we really share with you today, is that you've got to find your story and you've got to find your way of doing it. I think one of the things that we're all going to share with you is that if you decide on this path, one, Eileen Crane, who is huge in the Reuben Clark Law Society, she gave me the quote one time that really meant a lot to Larry and I. It's choose your tears. And she says that as especially young women are trying to decide whether or not they're going to go through this law path or not. You're going to cry if you don't, you're going to cry if you do. You've got to decide which. And I think there's a lot of that in having our families and our careers together, and both deciding to be attorneys at the same time. And then the other thing is that we absolutely, all of our stories share minutes matter. And I think that's one of the things that we go back to all the time.
Yeah, that's all so true, Angel. Thank you for sharing that. And I also appreciated having three such different stories and life perspectives. It was really inspiring, because I think a lot of times we think we have to do things a certain way and we don't. You got to work it out how it works for you. We did have a question. Do you have any regrets or wish you would have done anything differently? And also, how did you make sure your kids had a good day to day?
Hard time. I think we heard that. I don't know.
I have a regret. So I think when I first started practicing at the firm, right, big firm, big city, I felt like I always had to immediately respond.
Mm-hmm.
And if they called me, I'd run into the office, I'd go in on the weekends. And I think, over time, what I've learned is that, and some of that time would have been better spent with my family.
Mm-hmm.
What I've learned is that some things don't have to be responded to immediately. And it comes with maybe experience and judgment to know, like, even my boss, like, he'll text me or something and I'll be like, nah, go wait till tomorrow. Versus another text, I'll be like, oh, sorry, hon, I've got to step out of dinner at the restaurant and, call him back. But that's one regret I have, is that, I think too often prioritize responsiveness over really, long-term values that I had.
Yeah. Go ahead, Anime.
I have a regret too. Before I came to law school, had always wanted to work and wanted to look at what a dual career life would look like. But never was worried that it was bad in some way. And so I never put in research to figure out what that could look like. And it wasn't until honestly, right before law school, and then when I came to law school, that I finally started talking to people and asking, in a situation like this, okay, how do you do this? What are you valuing? What do you want? How did you get here? And I wish that I would have done research sooner, just because there is so much value in looking at other people's successes and failures and understanding how different it can look. I had only one person that I was looking at when I came to law school, and I wish that I would have opened my eyes to see that there's so many different ways that you can make it work and it can be right for you and your family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Our original plan was not to look like this. When Angel had started working for a law firm and was advancing quickly there, and I had a job with the state in our insurance department and also worked a part-time job. And when she had our first child, the plan and the first, 2 years was that I quit my job and I went home and I was a stay-home dad. And that's what the grand plan was, is that we would be a traditional family and that there's a bread earner and a homemaker, but it would be gender swapped for the norm. And the regret is that just did not necessarily work out. There were cultural issues, both pressures from my family's interpretation of what that should look like. Certainly didn't land well in our particular ward and stake at the same time the proclamation on the family landed. And then there was an unexpected threat from the office of the direction our Angel's boss was going that would put kind of long-term plans for her and at risk. And so the regret is that kind of the opportunity to see what that would look like was lost. It just didn't happen. But the ability to pivot and realize that, look, we still have a marriage, we still have children to raise, we still have goals. And again, like I said, we pivoted towards this idea of the family firm, and as much as we can do that and kind of fill that gap of what we didn't choose, we would do so. Our kids will very candidly say that there were things that they missed from not being part of a more traditional type situation. There were play groups that you are not necessarily welcomed into, or not, and it doesn't even have to be welcomed. There just may not be time. There are those little after school type moments that they pick up from pop culture and other places. The idea that your mom's going to have fresh baked cookies for you coming home from school was one of my daughter's things that she missed. And I have no idea even where she picked that up. I still have yet to meet anyone who that was what their after school looked like. But yeah, the regret is that it just, your first choice doesn't always work out. But that doesn't mean that the second choice can't still align with your principles and your ideas and deals, and can't be fulfilling and something that provides meaning to you, your family, your community, your church. So.
But it's super exciting to get to be at this stage of life and to get to see some young men who want to do that role reversal. So our family, I don't do any of the cooking. I don't do any of the housework. So that part we kept in the role reversal.
None of the women in our family know how to cook and care for themselves.
But the guys do. So
my son and I are in charge of those areas. So.
Yeah. So that is fun. And we like helping that progress. Larry and I are also high school debate sweethearts. So we debated against each other. So I really appreciated the whole comment of we don't agree. That's, I think, one of our strong suits, is that we consistently debating each other the whole time. But also having a family firm together. There's a lot. I don't have to have, the only confidences that we have is church confidences. We work on the same cases and everything in the law firm. So that has been really helpful for our marriage, is that, of course, it can be a little bit talk about work too much, but we do get to share everything together, except for some of the church confidentiality that we have to keep.
It's fantastic. Thank you for that response and explanation of how it works. I have another question. And you some of you touched on this, but I feel like a lot of times there's trouble with the work always being available now. It's on your phone, it's all around you. People can get in contact with you all the time. How do you guys deal with that? Do you have time limits? I mean, what are some practical tips to work on that, especially when there's 2 people working in the family, and you know, you got to carve some time out.
We're definitely grateful for the Sabbath. That is a no work zone.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't think Troy-
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Anna.
I'll go fast. My husband mentioned this earlier, but what worked for us when it got very, very overwhelming, especially this past summer, was to like have no talk times, but then also if you needed to talk, scheduling it and just say, even if it's only in like an hour, at least it's like a conscious, like we can be ready and it's not just like at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just going to say, I don't think Troy nor I are good at this. So, and it's okay not to be good at it. You know, we're good at other things. And I think we're both quite responsive to our email. There have been many, many, many vacations. I actually have an entire photo collection of Troy standing in a swimming pool somewhere working on his phone. We're just not great at it, but we are great at other things. And I think that's okay.
Totally.
Well, I think I might be a little better at it than Denise, but that's only because I do try to I can set my phone down and just walk away from it, and I do try to do that and not check emails and text during particular periods, either over dinner or when I'm working outside. I just need a break. I can't be on my phone all the time. So.
Totally. Okay, fantastic. We are out of time. I don't know, we have a couple minutes if any of you have any closing thoughts, something you didn't share that you wanted to. Anything else you guys want to share? We all good? Okay. Well, I appreciate so much you all coming. Thank you all for attending as well. Our speakers were fantastic. I loved hearing the dual perspective of husband and wife teams. I think that was extremely valuable, and I appreciate it very much, you guys coming and those of you who logged in to listen to this. So I did want to just say Reuben Clark Law Society Women in Law Organization is going to have a pre-law conference in Provo on Wednesday, September 27th. And so if you guys want to come to that, we would love to have you. Or if you know any people thinking about law school, that's who we want to come. So thank you again, and I'll have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.